I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a return guest from the website peakprosperity.com. It's Chris Martenson. Chris Martenson, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Greg, such a pleasure to be back with you and all your subscribers.
Well, look, good to have you back. One of the things you said in one of the past interviews is that, there's this big stack of paper. It's like this. And then there's this little bitty stack of real stuff. And it's the stack of real stuff really hasn't gotten very much bigger. But the stack of paper has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, I think the global debt is something like 240 trillion. That's all bond debt. And I know people have said, "Oh, you've been saying this every year for how long that this is going to come down." It should have come down. It should have come down, but nobody ever imagined the crazy fraud, crime, intervention, money printing, bond buying. Nobody ever imagined the all the central banks working together as the Nomi Prinz documented in her latest book, working together to prop this up. Nobody ever imagined that would ever happen. But it's going to happen, and that's where you come in. Tell me about what you see coming down the tracks here.
Well, I think it's really important that people have the right context for this. There's a business cycle. We used to have them. Alan Greenspan decided no more business cycles under his watch, so he eliminated the business cycle and replaced it with something called the credit cycle. Now, that's why the Federal Reserve and all the other central banks, they don't care about unemployment. They don't care about how much your gasoline or bread costs. They care if the credit markets are growing. And that's what they got addicted to in the late 80s, somewhere around that zone. And that's what we've been living under, a regime of increasing credit cycles. Well, here's the thing. Business cycles, they come, they go. We're all familiar with it. Businesses get a little excited. They get ahead of themselves. And then there's a recession. And the bad businesses creatively get destroyed out of the game. The Fed didn't like that. They thought they wanted to be more in control. They wanted to be more activist. They wanted to have more power. They did all of those things. And so now we have a credit cycle. Here's why your listeners need to be concerned. Credit cycles, when they blow up, they're really very destructive. 2008 to 2009, very destructive. And instead of sort of realizing the error of their ways, they went for a third. This is the most comprehensive credit cycle we've ever seen. Remember, bubbles have two things that they need. One, a good story that people can believe in. Of course, it's a false story. And two, ample credit. That's what the Fed and the central banks of Europe and Japan have done, just flooded the world with credit. And now we have bubbles everywhere. But when these burst, Greg, it's going to be the worst bursting in anybody's lifetime because we've never seen anything like this.
You at Peak Prosperity are down on the street level and warning people. I remember you did a series of stuff 10 years ago about survival. What was it? It was Peak Prosperity. What was the name of it? Oh, shoot.
The Crash Course.
The Crash Course about surviving the crash, which you did have a crash. 2008 was a massive crash. And a lot of things did go into the tank. Of course, that was the warm-up act for what we're getting. What's it going to look like if you were to do the Crash Course today, 10 years later, in 2018? You were doing it in the mid-2000s, early 2000s, 2005 or 6 or 7. I watched the whole thing. I thought it was fascinating. If you were going to do the Crash Course today, what would you tell people?
Well, it would be a little bit more apocalyptic in a sense, because when I put the Crash Course together, remember, Greg, I put three big concepts together that people need to understand. One, the economy. Let's all understand how it works, how money works, what the economy is really consisting of, all of that. Very important. Second, energy. If you don't understand the energy story, you can't possibly understand what's really happening economically. And third, the environment or the ecological side. The warning signs we saw 10 years ago ecologically today: disappearing species, whales not breeding, phytoplankton gone, coral reefs dying, giant aquifers serving billions of people drying out. It's a little bit more apocalyptic now, only because we as a species didn't heed the warnings. So, the way I look at it now, I say it's really, we don't have great choices anymore. We have kind of a bad choice and a worse choice. And the bottom line is simply this: any grade schooler can work it out. You can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. It's not a hard concept, but every machinery of power in the government, in both the monetary, the fiscal authorities, they have to have continued growth, or their precious banks get in trouble and go belly up. 2008, I was saying, let's lose Citibank, let's lose JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, parasites. None of them produce a single thing, and they skim like crazy, and they do it with insider trading, graft, corruption, felonies. It's awful. So my advice in 2008 was, let's turn a new direction. Let's understand the limits, and let's lose. We don't need 40% of our economy to be, taken over by parasites. 4% is about the amount that financialization and banking should occupy in a healthy economy. It's at 40%. Let's lose some of that, right? That's not the direction we went. And of course, here we are with, as you mentioned, close to 250 trillion of debt and unfunded or underfunded liabilities that are as much as 5 to 10 times higher than that, depending on the country we're talking about.
When you say the financialization should be 4%, I mean, you're talking about that you're going to get a big hit in the finance sector.
Sure.
401ks, pensions, things like that. Can people, if you have a pension, should you be feeling all groovy, like you're going to get paid that pension, or at least the nominal, at least the buying power of the dollars in that pension until you're old and gray?
No, it's impossible, and here's why. Every single pension has now collectively an assumed rate of return of 7.2%, down from 8%, but still, we haven't seen anything close to 7.2% real growth in the global economy in 15 years. It just doesn't occur right now. So the assumption that you're going to have 7.2% compounded growth in those pensions, whether that's the CalPERS for California, the Illinois pension system, you name it, that's implying that you're going to double the asset base in that pension every 10 years, which means 10 years from now, it's twice as big. 20 years from now, it's 4 times as big, 4 times as much purchasing power. Well, how does anything have purchasing power? It has to relate to how you open this up. There's the claims. That's what the pensions are. They're claims. But what's the real stuff? Well, the real stuff is what we care about. When I'm retired, I don't care how much my portfolio is worth. I care about what I can buy with that portfolio. I need to eat. I'm going to have medicines. I'm going to want, to have entertainment. I'm going to want to consume things. And so, of course, the implicit assumption of every pension system is that the world just gets exponentially larger, the economic world. And that hasn't been true, Greg, for 15 years. Like, at what point in time do humans hold up their hands, make the T sign and say, this isn't working? This is a bad idea. That's what's in play right now. And that's what I think explains everything from the Catalonia breakaway to Brexit to Trump. People are feeling squeezed because there's not enough economic oxygen for everybody, and the elites are taking their fair share.
And Trump is working on bringing back jobs. I mean, listen, unfortunately, he walked into office with $20 trillion. I like him. I don't want people to think I'm a critic of him. Actually, I'm pulling for him. I pulled for Obama, too, but, what do we get? Fast and Furious and the Iran deal that nobody signed. And anyway, I digress. But I think we'd be in a full-blown depression right now if Hillary would have gotten in. I've said that before. But he is stuck with the guy that's going to have to reorganize all this, which I'm kind of glad he's doing it rather than Hillary. I mean, she'd be selling Alaska. But this is going to get reorganized. That's what everybody's throwing up the T sign, as you said. This is going to get reorganized, right? What's it look like? How are they going to reorganize? I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, you can't go back on the credit, on the full faith and credit of the American on the Treasury bond. You can't go." I don't know why you can't. I mean, you can't pay it. Nobody can pay the debt. So my thing is, how is this? It's going to get reset. How is it going to get reset? What's it going to look like in your mind?
Well, when you get this far over the tips of your skis, when you have as much debt as the United States has at the federal level, but that's just a piece of the pie. I know most people talk about that, but the overall debt level in the United States, including auto loans, mortgages, consumer debt, student loans, whatever, corporate debt, we're sitting at about 60 some odd trillion dollars right now. It's a huge number. And when you get to this level of indebtedness, plus remember those under or unfunded liabilities like pensions and entitlement programs. When you get to this level of indebtedness, there's really only one question left to be resolved, and that's who's going to eat the losses? That's it. So when you start to answer that question, of course, the banks and the other people who are writing the laws right now, they are pretty sure that they're not going to have to take the losses. But for the person who's actually, relying on or counting on that pension, they're probably going to be the ones who eat the losses. And there's only 2 ways that you sort of pay off a pension that can't be met. One is you reduce the benefits, or 2, you have to increase the taxes on the people paying into the system. Both of those are already happening, but that's going to have to accelerate going forward because there's no way to make this work. And here's where the social tension comes in. Even as that's happening, even as ordinary middle-class people are being destroyed in this process, the rich are taking more and more and more out of the system. And that's courtesy of the policies of the Federal Reserve. This is not an accident. It's not like we're describing a comet that just mysteriously showed up in our universe. Oh, look at rich people getting richer. This is active policy, and it's being promulgated by both the Federal Reserve and Congress and the Senate. And that's why it's so infuriating.
Could Donald Trump default on these bonds? I mean, the Puerto Rican. I brought this up a million times because I think it's the canary that's dead on the floor of the coal mine, and that was $74 billion in bond debt. And I actually heard Donald Trump say, "We're going to let that go. We're going to let that go." Couldn't the rich people get creamed? They would have been creamed last time because they had their money all tied up in corporate debt and companies. Now they have it all tied up in sovereign debt. Couldn't the rich get creamed in a debt reset and a restructuring? I mean, couldn't they just be hit if they were not? We're going to let that go. That mentality goes on. Couldn't they be hit?
Well, absolutely, Greg. They would be eviscerated in this particular story because if you went down the debt default path, the holders of that debt are the ones who get creamed in that story. That's obviously not something any of the wealthy people want to do, whether it's a private equity fund, a hedge fund, an endowment for a major university that are holding these instruments of debt, or whether it's an entire sovereign nation like China holding U.S. treasuries. Nobody wants to take that hit. And of course, it would be very politically unpopular. And I don't think we would go down that path willingly. In fact, I'm positive we wouldn't go down that willingly. That, is it possible we could go down that path anyway? It's possible. Meanwhile, what is the Federal Reserve going to do in order to assure that the wealthy and the well-connected do not take those losses? They're going to print more. They're going to try and spread it out across everybody by creating inflation and continuing to run their regime of what's called financial repression, which simply means skimming the purchasing power from every pension, every savings account, every checking account, and taking those little dribs and drabs you pull from each of those crevices and then handing that benefit, that purchasing power that's been stolen, you hand that back over to the federal government as well as the holders of the sovereign debt. So that's the scheme. It's been running for 10 years. No reason it can't go longer at this point.
And so in other words, if you got a 12, 15, $20 million, I mean, you don't care if gas is like $6 a gallon.
Right.
I mean, so kind of get it. Yeah, okay. I don't care. I mean,
right.
for a guy who's making, $40,000 or $25,000 a year, working for the city or making $60,000 at, wherever, and I'm not saying that's not no money. That's just normal people money, $60,000, $50,000, $80,000. I don't know, firefighter, that kind of thing. Those people go, whoa, $6 a gallon. Holy cow. We're not going out this weekend, right?
Well, absolutely. And you can hardly open the newspaper without reading another article about how the middle class is struggling and how their, real wages haven't kept up, or the story of two teachers suddenly in their 50s or 60s having to also become Uber drivers to just try and make ends meet. This is not a mystery. Again, this isn't some strange comet that just showed up in our solar system. This is what I predicted in 2008 with the crash course. I said, this is what's going to happen. You print money. And the Federal Reserve doesn't print wealth. The newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, they're all lying all the time. Oh, my God, look how much Netflix stock is up and Amazon on such a tear, as if that was real wealth. No, that's inflation in the financial assets created by the Federal Reserve. And they've created a lot of other inflation, and it's hurting people. And that's going to have political implications, social implications. But here's the big risk. Here's the part I think you and I want to center on, is that when these printing sprees, whatever we want to call them, when these credit cycles finally burst, they're wildly destructive. They're fast, they're hard, they're sharp, and they hurt.
And what does it look like to the guy on the street? Now, you've already described it. A couple of teachers also taking on Uber driving and stuff like that. And what does it look like to the guy on the street? A lot of people ask me this, and I never get I ask a lot of people this, and I never get a good answer. But I suspect I'll get one from you. What does it look like to John Q. Public? With a 2-car garage and a couple of older cars and some payments and that kind of thing. What does it look like to those people?
So let's just look back to 2008, but then multiply it by some whole number. If unemployment went to an official rate of 10 or 11%, it goes to twice that amount. Unofficially, it's actually a lot higher than that. So we would be looking at, when this next credit bubble bursts, I'm looking for 30, 40% unemployment. I mean, this is just like Greece. It's Portugal. It's literally just what happens when you have bad monetary policy and bad fiscal policy, right? Interest rates are going to go up, so we're going to look for housing prices to come down. And interest rates are probably going to go up because, a lot of people think the Federal Reserve can always keep interest rates low. Well, maybe they can. I'm less certain because the federal government's going to be running trillion-dollar deficits at least for the next 10 years, each of those years. That's a huge amount of new product. Somebody's got to buy that, plus all the other stuff that's out there. And when credit bubbles burst, what happens is there's just no more money in the system. It was fake money in the first place. It's kind of like, Greg, if you had an economy and I had an economy, let's imagine we're both earning $50,000 a year, but next year I borrow another $50,000. By the way we measure the economic value, we'd say, wow, Chris's economy just doubled. He earned 50, he borrowed 50, spent both. So he has a $100,000 economy. Greg still only has a $50,000 economy. His grew 0%, much worse shape. Absolutely false. Everything that's wrong about our economic system is that the Federal Reserve and other neoclassical economists do not count the debt in this story. We have record levels of corporate debt. We have huge levels of household debt, record levels of federal debt. Municipalities badly underfunded in their pensions, which is a form of debt for them. So when we look at this whole story, what did we get for all that debt? Do we have high-speed trains that take us from place to place? Do we have a brand new, internet infrastructure for this brand new shiny economy? Do we have a whole new alt energy system? No, we got some blown-up countries in the Middle East, and we have a lot of super wealthy people and a lot of other people that are struggling. That's sort of the mess that Trump walked into. And that mess is not just courtesy of Obama. That's literally a series of administrations going back a long ways, which is why I'm not a partisan person. This is an equal opportunity sort of a mess that we got on our hands. Both parties are complicit in this.
There's talk I'm hearing even from some of my sources, and if you just look at the news, Russia sold its treasury bonds. They're reportedly buying more gold. There's lots of stories out about China buying tons of gold, and they've got way more than what they'd ever admit to. I've also heard some of my sources have told me that the Trump administration seriously looking about getting gold back into the monetary system. If we get a reset, might we just get rid of the Federal Reserve? It's expensive, right? We could just, they print quarters and they mint quarters and dimes and half dollars. Why couldn't they mint just dollar bills, not notes? Could they get rid of the Federal Reserve? Could they bring gold back into the system? A two-pronged question. What say you?
Well, absolutely, you could. Listen, the money of a nation is just a medium of exchange. It's a commodity. There's no reason why you need a central bank to print money. The Treasury could print its own money. It could print its own treasury bills, Treasury notes right on top. $20, it comes straight from the U.S. Treasury. It doesn't say Federal Reserve note at the top. So there's no reason at all that a nation couldn't just print its own money, except that through the IMF and enforcement of world trade and the way the whole thing goes, you have to have a fractional reserve fiat money system in order to participate in the world economy. If you were, Uganda, and you said, hey, we'd like to just have, a non-debt-based money system, you would be forbidden from trading by the rules that exist. You can't back your currency with gold. That's an explicit thing that the IMF forbids. So we have a global system. And why do we have that? Well, because banking's it's really fun when you can print real purchasing power out of thin air, except it's not real in the sense that when you do that, you steal it from somebody else and you transfer it. Well, if I had that capability, I wouldn't want to give it up either. But the truth of the matter is you do not need a central bank to be as activist and as interventionist as this one. You could run our monetary policy off a laptop computer and not have any humans be involved in this, who are conflicted and everything we know. Charlie Munger said, you show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome, right? You can't trust an unelected cabal of people to run your monetary system when they are unaudited and you have no insight into what they're doing. Guess what? They're going to do stuff that's in their own self-interest. Why? Because they're people. Seems easy to me.
Could we get into an alternate currency system? And that's what Bitcoin is, right? It's up. Today, it's up past $8,000. People are really, what Bitcoin is a reflection of people saying, I don't like this currency, whether it's a Ripple or Bitcoin or some of the other ones that are out there, Ethereum. They're all looking for what's happening is they're looking for an alternative to debt-based currency that can just be printed up out of thin air. Are they not?
Well, of course they are. And listen, that's the traditional role of gold and silver. Is there a chance that we could see these digital currencies take on that role? Of course. Is it still possible for governments, if they decide to put a bullet in these cryptocurrencies and absolutely make them useless or worthless because you can't participate back into the banking system? Yeah, of course they could. Will they? We don't know yet. So I still think, we're watching this experiment run out. But what I absolutely love about the Bitcoin and other things like that is that they've opened people's discussion back up to the idea of money, the role it should play, scarcity, how it comes into creation. All of those things are really vital conversations to be having. And once you've had them, as you and your listeners know, once you've had them, you can't look at the Federal Reserve the same way again. You're like, wait a minute, they just print this stuff out of thin air in unlimited quantities. They how many trillions of dollars were swapped out with foreign banks, foreign central banks? We don't know, right? Because we can't find that information out. But it was huge numbers. Who was overseeing that? What people, did any of it get siphoned off? Is any of that parked in Cayman accounts that, maybe the Panama Papers could have revealed? We don't know. Why? Because it's totally unaudited. That's unacceptable.
So what would you tell people to do? I mean, what would you? You're a good guy, and you're a down to earth guy. You and Adam Taggart, your business partner, and I want to make sure we get in the conference you have in September, which is David Stockman, who's fantastic. But what would you, before we get there, what would you tell people to do to protect themselves? They still have some time to protect themselves, although a lot of people are now sounding the alarm that this fall is going to get shaky again. I don't know if that's true, but what would you tell people to do to protect themselves?
Well, listen, just a few steps in this process. First, you have to get educated. You have to know what the larger context is. If you're just getting your economic news out of, say, the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, New York Times, you're not educated. So you have to understand the larger system, what the credit cycle is. Two, you need to understand that this is unsustainable and it's going to break. So when it does, we advise heavily people are building up not just one form of capital, build your financial capital, get some dry powder for rainy day. There's going to be some incredible deals coming in the future. There aren't good deals now, Netflix with a PE of 200 and all that. But there will be better deals in the future. And so save some dry powder. But after you've got that one form of capital, financial capital built, 7 other forms of capital, including your social capital, your emotional capital, your material capital, things like this, that's what we heavily advise people to do is become wealthy in all these forms of capital. You'll be more resilient for whatever is going to come. But the third thing is you really have to be aware of the fact that the trajectory we are on is unsustainable. So it'll stop. You need to ask yourself, where do you want to be when that comes to pass? What kind of life do you want to have? What kind of friends do you want to have? What are you doing? How are you adding value? All of those things, really important questions to be asking, particularly if you're a younger person who's really thinking about which direction you're going to go in. And I hate to be that person who says, wow, tough times are going to come, but this is what happens when you live beyond your means. You have to live below your means for a period of time. We've pretended that wasn't true for a couple of administrations. We won't be able to continue that forever. And to put a time frame on it, if it had, within the next year, I think it's very likely, not 100%, but very likely we experience the beginning of the economic decline. But if you follow my work, you'll understand we have an energy or particularly an oil shortfall that's going to start coming in the next 2 to 4 years. And that is, to me, a hard stop in this story.
And a lot of gold and silver people, that's got to be one of the forms of capital that you're talking about, because you're a lot of common sense. Are the people who bought gold and silver or who buy gold and silver now, are they going to be cushioned a bit from the fall with what you're saying is going to be likely a money printing extravaganza?
Well, in a fair world, the answer is of course. We don't live in a fair world. Once you see how many different ways that the big banks have been caught manipulating every possible market out there. I mean, my goodness, they manipulated LIBOR, which is, $350 trillion of assets are tied to that, and they were manipulating that. They've manipulated currencies, the U.S. Treasury market. Anything they can, and this isn't to say pick on gold and silver particularly, but anything that the U.S. and London banks can manipulate, lie, cheat, steal, and do, well, they do it, right? Because there's no consequences. And again, show me the incentive, and I'll show you the outcome. So I'm not clear that we're going to get to a place where gold and silver will really pay off in the way I was hoping for a long time, because I've watched this too long, Greg. Every time they get in trouble with their making mistakes, they just change the rules again. So in a fair world, absolutely, real assets are the place you need to be if and when a paper tower comes crumbling down. I'm diversified myself, though. I believe in land. I believe in real estate. I believe in gold. I believe in silver. I believe in other metals. I believe in these hard assets, because this is where really we're going to have to hide out. And of course, if you had held such equivalent hard assets in Turkey, in Venezuela, in places where we're seeing the currency collapses and declines, in Argentina, these would have been great places to have been hiding out.
And the long and short of it, no matter what they finally do, I mean, ultimately they'll probably get behind it and push it up. But you're saying that all the places we could be Turkey and Argentina and Chile and whoever else has had terrible hard times. I mean, United States, Venezuela, we could be that country, could we not? Or at least a version of one of those countries.
Yes, and even, it'll take time for that to play out. Obviously, look, Venezuela is going to, I think, last number I heard, they're going to hit 1,000,000% rate of inflation. Yeah. They're well on their way to being Zimbabwe. But look how many years it took even for that to unfold. And this is a small country with a lot of pressures on it, right? So United States is a much larger fish in this story. But the things that could upend that very quickly is if the global order quickly upends, if there's some sort of a larger outbreak of war, if, God forbid, the U.S. Navy discovers it's actually vulnerable to the latest anti-ship missile technology. A variety of things, Greg, could turn the story very quickly, which is why I advise people understand what the risks are, keep watching, and make sure that you're paying attention, by watching the news that you bring forward and that I bring forward, other people who are looking not for what we're being told to look at, but looking at where we know we need to be looking.
You can't go wrong with real stuff.
Right.
And right down to food and water and ammunition and land and gold and silver and artwork. And you can't go wrong with real stuff. A car title, right?
Absolutely. Or put your money into skills, learning brand new skills that are going to be valuable no matter what. There was this, I just wrote a big piece for my audience, and it was around this crazy article that came out about how a professor had been brought into a room. He thought he was giving a talk on high technology. He sat down with 5 very senior hedge fund managers, all men who are very wealthy, and they were asking questions like, how do I maintain control of my security forces after the event, whatever that was in their minds, right? So there's a lot of concern out there that we know that when this worm turns, boy, it's going to be a lot faster than it has been in the past. And, this is if and only if it doesn't go even faster because of an actual break of war, whatever kind of war we're talking about, cyber war, kinetic war, trade war, whatever it happens to be. But these are all high pressures. And the framework I have to offer people is to say, look, we just got a little out of control with the paper printing. It happens all the time. It's happened many times in history. It happens for the same reasons, because we're humans. We want the free lunch. But guess what? There is no free lunch. And so if you can see that, there's a wealth transfer coming. And the wealth transfer is going to have a bright red line, and people are going to get trapped on the side where they hold paper claims. And the people who are going to be have the options and who are going to preserve their wealth are going to be on the other side of the line, and they're going to have their wealth tied up in real things. That's the period of history I see about to unfold.
Real things. So the protection comes from real things and real skills.
Absolutely. Tangible, real things that derive real value that you can understand.
Check. You and David Stockman in New York in September. He's a fascinating guy, brilliant guy, former White House budget director. I love David Stockman. But you got him for some special deal. Let's talk about it. Tell me about it.
Well, certainly. So this is going to be on September 16th. It's a Sunday. We're going to have a 6-hour extravaganza where we're going to bring people in a room. It's going to be fairly intimate. Myself, Adam Taggart, and Adam Stockman. Now, Adam and I have done 5 of these already. David Stockman.
Yeah, you said Adam Stockman. David Stockman. Go ahead.
All right, can you edit that?
No. Just go on. Everybody knows what you meant. David Stockman. Go ahead. Adam Taggart, David Stockman. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Adam Taggart, David Stockman. Okay. We like you.
And what we do is we're going to sit down and we're going to have a lot of data. We're going to have a lot of charts. We're going to be able to talk about China, oil, where we really are in the debt cycle. So these are for people who want to get grounded in the data and then have the chance to ask us any questions that might come up after we go through the data. And we've just got fantastic reviews from the people who came to these in San Francisco and Portland and Seattle, Denver, and in Austin that we've done so far. Just really highly valuable time for people who think this way to get together, meet each other, and then have some time to interact with Adam, myself, and David Stockman.
Is there going to be a video component of this too that you can buy later after the fact?
We're looking into that. Not a guarantee at this point, but if you want to come and register for it, peakprosperity.com/NYC. That'll get you there.
Listen, you are fabulous, Chris Martenson. So is David Stockman, but I never say enough about Adam Taggart. You never see him because you have the bigger name. He always gets out of the way and says, I'm going to have Chris Martenson on because it'll, track better. It'll end up better in search. But Adam Taggart's a very bright guy.
Absolutely.
He's just very, very bright guy. And if he's going to be at this conference too, he's worth coming to too. He's not as well known as you and David Stockman, but bright guy. Listen, thanks and again, when is this coming on?
This is September 16th. That's a Sunday. It'll be from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock.
10 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Where is it being held in New York?
You would have to go and check out at peakprosperity.com/NYC. All the data's there.
All the data. Okay, then you'll give me a link for that. I'll put up for you folks at YouTube. You can go up there. All links are at usawatchdog.com. That'll be in the after the interview section. And people who just come to this on usawatchdog.com after the interview section, all the links for this conference with what's it called anyway? It's the Chris Martenson, Adam Taggart, and David Stockman conference.
Yeah, this is our summit. So we call them summits, and these are for people who want to know more, hungry for information.
Okay, thank you very much. It's Chris Martenson at peakprosperity.com. Thank you very much for joining us today on usawatchdog.com.
My pleasure, Greg.